Today we explore the fascinating and tragic story of Absalom, one of King David's sons. Absalom is known for both his stunning beauty and his charisma, but his life was marked by tragedy, revenge, and excessive ambition. From his birth into royalty to his dramatic death on the battlefield, Absalom's story is a tale filled with love, betrayal, and redemption. We will discover how the tragedy of his sister Tamar led Absalom to take revenge on his half-brother Amnon, and how his exile in Geshur and his return to Jerusalem marked the beginning of his conspiracy against his own father. We will see how Absalom won the favor of the people and proclaimed himself king, challenging David and unleashing a civil war in Israel. And finally, we will relive the events of the battle in the forest of Ephraim, where Absalom met his tragic end. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you every time we publish a new video. Let's start. Bible stories are rich with profound teachings that provide us with valuable reflections on our own lives and decisions. Through them, we are called to avoid the mistakes that led others to tragic fates, and to choose a path that leads us to what is right. Therefore, dear listener, as we explore the story of Absalom together, I encourage you to open your heart to the lessons that this biblical narrative offers us and to reflect on how to apply these teachings in your daily life to make wise decisions and avoid negative consequences. Now, Absalom, one of King David's sons, is a prominent figure in biblical history, known for his appearance, his ambition, and his tragic death. The story of Absalom is told primarily in the books of Samuel in the Old Testament. In the historical and genealogical context, Absalom was the third son of King David, one of the most significant kings of Israel, and Maacah, a princess of Geshur. This union not only consolidated political alliances, but also reflected the complex dynastic relationships of the time. Maacah was the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, a region in the northeast of Israel. Geshur was a small but significant kingdom in the Syrian region, and its union with David symbolized a strategic alliance in times of conflict and diplomacy. Let us read in the second book of Samuel, chapter 3, verse 3. His second, Chileab, of Abigail, the wife of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. David, before becoming king, was anointed by the prophet Samuel, while Saul still ruled. His ascension to the throne was a mixture of military, divine, and political effort. David had several wives, and from each one sons were born who competed for successor status. Born in Jerusalem, Absalom grew up in an environment full of political intrigue and family tensions. He had several brothers and sisters, some of whom played important roles in the history of Israel. First, Amnon, half-brother of Absalom, son of King David with Ahinoam of Jezreel. Amnon was the eldest son and the legitimate heir to the throne before he was killed by Absalom. Amnon's rape of Tamar was a pivotal event that set off a chain of tragic events. Second, Tamar, Absalom's sister on her father's and mother's side, and victim of Amnon's rape. Tamar was a key figure in Absalom's story, as her suffering motivated Absalom to avenge her honor. Third, Solomon, son of David with Bathsheba, and who eventually became king of Israel after David's death. The election of Solomon as king, instead of Absalom, was an act of politics and divinity that closed the cycle of dynastic ambitions. Before looking at future events involving David's children, it is important to note that it all originates from David's sin with Bathsheba, a central event in his life. God would not leave David's sin unpunished, so he sent the prophet Nathan to confront him. Nathan used a parable to show the injustice of David's actions, and he repented. Although his sin was forgiven, Nathan warned him that there would be serious consequences for his life and his kingdom. From then on, a series of tragedies began that affected David and his family. Let's read in the second book of Samuel chapter 12, verses 10 to 12. Therefore now the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me, and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, Behold, I will raise up evil against you from your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes, and give them to your neighbor, who will lie with your wives in the sight of the sun, because you did it secretly, but I will do this before all Israel and in full sun. The sword will never depart from your house. What a harsh sentence. Because David had despised God and killed Uriah in order to take his wife for himself. God pronounced judgment on David and his family that would be met with violence, rivalry, and murder. The scriptures record at least 4 events as a result of that curse. Now, having understood the reasons behind the events that would take place later, and that would be so painful, we realize, dear listeners, that the sins we commit can have serious consequences that affect our family, the one we value most. In the memories of King David, a part of his painful story is about to be captured, thus fulfilling the word of God. The tragedy begins with the tragic death of Bathsheba's newborn, followed by Amnon, influenced by a destructive passion, becoming obsessed with Tamar. This obsession culminated in the rape of his sister Tamar, an act that not only destroyed the victim, but also caused a significant fracture in the royal family. Amnon, by acting against Tamar's will, not only broke the moral and social laws of the time, but also dishonored the name of David and his dynasty. Let us read in the second book of Samuel chapter 13, verses 11 to 14. And when she put them before him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, Come, my sister, lie with me. She then answered him, No, my brother, do not do violence to me, because it should not be done like that in Israel. Don't do such a vile thing, for where would I go with my disgrace? And even you would be esteemed as one of the wicked in Israel. So now I beg you to speak to the king, for he will not deny you to me. But he did not want to listen to her. But being able to do more than her, he forced her, and he slept with her. After this event, Absalom enters the scene with a burning thirst for revenge, determined to do justice for the disgrace suffered by his sister Tamar. Upon learning of the rape of his sister Tamar by his half-brother Amnon, Absalom experienced deep anger and a relentless desire to avenge injustice. For 2 years, his anger lay dormant as he planned revenge on him. Finally, he organized a party at Baal Hazor, inviting all of King David's sons. In a premeditated act, during the banquet, Absalom ordered his servants to kill Amnon. This act of revenge not only fulfilled his desire for justice for his sister's wrong, but also deepened his enmity with his father David, marking the beginning of a series of events that would lead to Absalom's rebellion against the king. Amnon's death at the feast symbolized the beginning of a larger conflict that would threaten David's throne and divide the kingdom of Israel. Let's read in the second book of Samuel chapter 13, verses 28 and 29. And Absalom had given command to his servants, saying, Look, I pray you, when Amnon's heart is glad with wine, and when I say, Strike Amnon, then kill him, and do not fear, for I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. And Absalom's servants did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded them. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one mounted his mule and fled. After murdering Amnon, Absalom fled to Geshur to take refuge with his grandfather Talmai. This exile not only allowed him to escape David's justice, but also represented a period of reflection and planning for his future rebellion. During these 3 years in Geshur, Absalom stayed out of Israel's political affairs, although his resentment and ambition continued to grow. Let's read in the second book of Samuel chapter 13, verses 38 and 39. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and he stayed there 3 years. And King David desired to see Absalom, for he was already comforted about Amnon, who was dead. David felt a great affinity for Absalom, and after having reconciled himself with the death of Amnon, he desired the company of his exiled son, already absent for 3 years. But fear of public opinion made him hesitate about forgiving his son. The reconciliation between David and Absalom was facilitated by Joab, the commander of David's army. Joab, concerned about the growing divide between father and son, orchestrated a series of events that led to David's reunification with Absalom. Joab sent a wise woman from Tekoa to intercede with the king, arguing that family reconciliation was necessary. David agreed to Absalom's return to Jerusalem, although he initially kept him away from his presence. Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing his father, a period he used to increase his influence and prepare the ground for his rebellion. Finally, Absalom carried out his rebellion in a shrewd and meticulously planned manner, deploying a strategy that combined his personal appeal with careful manipulation of public perception. Let us read in the second book of Samuel chapter 14, verses 25 and 26. And in all Israel, there was none so praised for his beauty as Absalom. From the sole of his foot to the top of his head there was no defect in him. When he cut his hair, which he did at the end of each year, because it caused him discomfort, and that is why he cut it, he weighed the hair on his head 200 shekels of real weight. Absalom possessed an appearance that evoked royalty, and many probably saw him as the future king of Israel. This physical trait, along with his ability to connect with the people, played a crucial role in his ability to challenge David's authority and mobilize the nation against him. He took advantage of his natural charisma and imposing presence to win the favor of citizens, presenting himself in an accessible and understanding manner on the city portal. There, he listened carefully to the complaints and concerns of the people, acting as an intermediary willing to provide justice and resolve the problems they faced. While Absalom presented himself as a just and dedicated leader, in contrast, he spread the idea that King David was not adequately fulfilling his royal responsibilities. He strove to reinforce the perception that David was detached from the needs of the people, suggesting that he himself would be a more just and attentive ruler. Let's read in the second book of Samuel chapter 15, verses 4 and 6. And Absalom said, "Who would make me a judge in the land, so that all those who have a lawsuit or business would come to me, and I would give them justice?" And it came to pass that when any man came near to bow down to him, he stretched out his hand and took him and kissed him. In this way he did with all the Israelites who came to the king for judgment, and thus Absalom stole the hearts of those of Israel. Thus, through a combination of calculated empathy and veiled criticism of David's reign, Absalom was able to cement a solid base of popular support for his own rebel cause. 7 years had passed since Tamar was raped, and 5 years had passed since Amnon was murdered. Absalom had not seen his father in 5 years. But when the two men finally met face to face, Absalom obtained a complete forgiveness. He then took the favor his father had shown him and used it as a platform to launch a revolution. David spared the life of his son, but Absalom responded by plotting the death of his father. Until this time, Absalom had kept his ambitions to become king a secret. However, he was now heading to Hebron accompanied by a large group of followers under the pretext of fulfilling a vow that he had promised to Jehovah. This trip to Hebron, apparently an act of religious devotion, actually hid a more sinister plan. Absalom was about to begin his rebellion against his own father, King David. Let us read in the second book of Samuel chapter 15, verses 10 to 12. Then Absalom sent messengers to all the tribes of Israel, saying, "When you hear the sound of the trumpet, you will say, 'Absalom reigns in Hebron.'" And 200 men from Jerusalem, invited by him, went with Absalom, who went in their simplicity, knowing nothing. And while Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he called Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city of Gilo. And the conspiracy became powerful, and the people who followed Absalom increased. In a decisive act, Absalom proclaimed himself king in Hebron, an important city in the history of Israel, being the first capital of the kingdom before David moved it to Jerusalem. Hebron represented a strategic and symbolic base for their rebellion. Absalom's proclamation as king was an act of open defiance to David and established division in Israel. Now, when David received news of Absalom's rebellion and the imminent threat it represented, he was forced to make a drastic decision: flee Jerusalem. This escape was not a simple retreat, but a desperate action to preserve his life and that of his loyal followers in the face of imminent danger. David's decision to leave the city revealed not only his keen strategic ability in times of crisis, but also his bravery and determination to protect those with him. Now, Absalom and his followers now arrived at Jerusalem, with Ahithophel as his most trusted advisor. In the city, Absalom met Hushai, who also joined his cause with an implicit declaration of loyalty. Absalom's attitude in pointing out Hushai's apparent betrayal of David is ironic, given that he himself had rebelled against his own father. Hushai responded to this suggestion with the affirmation that he would serve Jehovah's chosen one and all the men of Israel, saying that he would serve the son as he had served the father. When asked by Absalom, Ahithophel offered cruel and deeply immoral advice. He suggested to Absalom that he take the concubines of his father, David, and do so publicly in a tent pitched on the terrace of the royal palace. This act would not only cement the final break between Absalom and David, but would also serve as a public demonstration of his new power and authority. Let's read in the second book of Samuel, chapter 16, verses 21 and 22. "Go and lie with your father's concubines," Ahithophel answered, "because he left them here to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will know that you have insulted your father beyond all hope of reconciliation, and the people will support you." Then they pitched a tent on the roof of the palace so that everyone could see it, and Absalom went in and had sex with his father's concubines. Ahithophel believed that by doing this, he would strengthen the Israelites' loyalty to Absalom, and perhaps not coincidentally, secure his own position in the new regime. Later, Ahithophel proposed to Absalom an immediate and decisive attack against David. His plan was to gather 12,000 men and pursue David at night, taking advantage of his vulnerability to ensure a quick and decisive victory. Hushai, loyal to David, infiltrated Absalom's court to counter Ahithophel's advice. When Absalom consulted him about Ahithophel's plan, Hushai discredited him, arguing that David and his men were experienced and dangerous warriors. Instead of a surprise attack, Hushai suggested gathering a massive army from all over Israel to confront David in a large-scale battle, a strategy that required more time and preparation. This bought crucial time for David, who was able to reorganize his forces and prepare for battle. Absalom decided to follow Hushai's advice, which thwarted Ahithophel's plan. Seeing his advice rejected and foreseeing the possible failure of the rebellion, Ahithophel committed suicide. The time gained allowed David to regroup his troops, and in the decisive battle in the forest of Ephraim. Ultimately, Absalom's rebellion culminated in a fierce battle in the forest of Ephraim. Before the battle, David wanted to join his troops in combat, but his men persuaded him not to go. The battle in the Ephraim forest was intense and brutal. David's forces, led by Joab, faced troops loyal to Absalom in difficult and treacherous terrain. The forest itself became an enemy, causing more casualties than the sword itself. In the midst of confusion and chaos, there were 20,000 losses that day among Absalom's troops, mainly as a result of the dense forest that trapped the soldiers. Ultimately, David's army was victorious. As Absalom fled, he was trapped by his long hair in the branches of an oak tree while he was riding a mule. This symbolic image represented the fall of his ambitions and his tragic destiny. Let's read in the second book of Samuel, chapter 18, verse 9. During the battle, Absalom crossed paths with some of David's men. He tried to escape on his mule, but as he rode under a large tree, his hair became tangled in the thick branches. The mule continued and left Absalom suspended in the air. Despite David's explicit orders to treat Absalom gently, Joab disobeyed. He found Absalom suspended in the air, defenseless, and killed him by sticking 3 darts into his heart. Absalom's death was a time of great sadness for David. When the news reached him, David was deeply moved and expressed his pain with a heartbreaking cry. Let's read verse 33. Then the king was overcome with emotion. He went up to the room above the entrance and began to cry. And as he went up, he cried, "Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom! If only I had died in your place! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" This battle not only marked the end of Absalom's rebellion, but also underscored the complexities of family conflict and the difficult decisions that both David and his commanders faced. The tragedy of Absalom served as a grim reminder of the consequences of unbridled ambition and betrayal. Dear listeners, the story of Absalom is a tragic narrative that offers profound lessons about sin, power, and family conflict. His life exemplifies the consequences of excessive ambition and revenge, as well as the painful effects of conflict on the royal family. The tragedy of Absalom reflects universal themes about power, filial love, suffering, and mainly the consequences of sin. And so we come to the end of this video. Thank you for being part of our channel. God bless you abundantly. Until the next video.